The message was only 27 seconds long, but it ended 9 years of marriage before I even left the grocery store parking lot. Matthew Bennett was sitting in his truck outside a Kroger in Naperville, Illinois, with the engine running, the heater blowing against the windshield, and a handwritten list on the passenger seat that said pasta sauce, Parmesan, salad greens, and the lemon sparkling water Olivia liked to keep in the refrigerator even though she only drank half the cans. It was a normal Thursday evening, the kind of evening that looks harmless until it becomes the line your life divides itself around. The parking lot was busy with people pushing carts through slush, headlights sliding over wet asphalt, a child crying near the cart return, someone laughing into a phone by the entrance. Life kept moving with the rude confidence of people who had no idea a marriage was about to stop inside a parked truck. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Olivia. A voice memo. Matthew smiled faintly because Olivia hated typing when she was cooking, and he assumed she had forgotten something. Maybe basil. Maybe garlic bread. Maybe the good Parmesan, not the shaker kind she said tasted like dust. He tapped play without thinking. Her voice filled the cab, soft, bright, and intimate in a way that made his hand freeze above the gear shift. Derek, last night was a mistake I would make again, she said, followed by a small laugh Matthew had not heard in his own kitchen for years. Matthew is so easy to fool. He thinks I am working late again tomorrow, so we have time. I just have to keep things normal. The memo ended with a little rustle, like fabric against a phone, then silence. 27 seconds. That was all it took. Matthew did not move. The heater kept running. The wipers dragged once across the windshield even though the rain had thinned to mist. Outside, a woman loaded groceries into a minivan, and an older man argued with a stuck cartwheel. The world continued its small errands while Matthew sat with one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting near a grocery list that suddenly felt like a prop from someone else's life. He played the memo again, not because he had misunderstood, because the mind sometimes asks pain to repeat itself before it agrees to believe. Olivia's voice came back, clearer the second time, each word less shocking and more permanent. Derek. Last night. Easy to fool. Keep things normal. He did not call her. He did not text. What is this? He did not give her the mercy of knowing what he knew before he knew what to do with it. He pressed the 3 dots beside the file, saved it, took a screenshot of the timestamp, forwarded a copy to a private email account he used for tax records, then sat there until his breathing slowed enough to sound like it belonged to him again. Matthew was 41, a financial operations manager for a logistics company, a man who believed in receipts, calendars, backups, and the quiet power of keeping records before emotions had the chance to edit history. He had built his life that way. Mortgage paid on time. Insurance renewed before expiration. Cars serviced before breakdowns. Student loans Olivia had carried into the marriage paid off without complaint. Her father's hospital bills organized in labeled folders when her family could not keep track of them. He was the man people trusted with complicated things because he made them less complicated. And apparently, in Olivia's private vocabulary, that meant easy to fool. A cart rolled loose and tapped the front bumper of his truck with a soft plastic thud. Matthew got out, returned it to the corral, and for some reason that ordinary act nearly broke him. Even now, with his marriage smoking quietly in his pocket, he still put things back where they belonged. He walked into the grocery store under fluorescent lights that made everything look too bright and too clean. He bought the pasta sauce. He bought the salad greens. He stood in front of the cheese case for almost a full minute before picking up the expensive Parmesan Olivia liked. Not because she deserved it, because changing the list would have been a reaction, and he was not ready to give the evening that much control over him. At the checkout, the cashier asked if he wanted paper or plastic. Matthew almost said it did not matter, but that was not true anymore. Details mattered. Records mattered. Choices mattered. Paper, he said. By the time he drove home, the voice memo sat in 3 places: his phone, his email, and the new folder he had created in cloud storage called Personal Records. The house glowed warmly at the end of their street, porch light on, curtains drawn, kitchen window fogged from whatever Olivia had started cooking. It looked like safety from the outside. Matthew parked in the driveway, picked up the grocery bags, and sat for one final second before going in. A husband had left that parking lot. A witness had come home. Matthew stood in the driveway for almost a full minute before he opened the truck door, because once he walked into that house, the old version of the evening would be gone forever. The paper grocery bags rested on the passenger seat, warm from the heater, ordinary enough to insult him. Pasta sauce, salad greens, lemon sparkling water, expensive Parmesan. Proof that 5 minutes before hearing Olivia's voice wrap itself around another man's name, he had still been a husband running an errand for dinner. He carried the bags inside with both hands steady and found Olivia in the kitchen wearing a cream sweater, her hair clipped loosely at the back of her head, stirring sauce on the stove like she had not just sent him the truth by accident. The room smelled like garlic, tomatoes, and basil. Steam fogged the window above the sink. A playlist hummed softly from the speaker near the coffee maker. Everything looked intimate, warm, and rehearsed. "You got Parmesan?" she asked without turning around. Matthew set the bags on the counter. "Yes." She glanced over her shoulder, smiled, and crossed the kitchen to kiss his cheek. Her lips touched his skin lightly, practiced and domestic. That was the moment the voice memo became worse. Not because of Derek. Derek was a name, a shadow, a man who apparently existed in the spaces she had carved out of their marriage. The worst part was Olivia's calm. The way she could stand inside their kitchen, use the pan he bought, cook on the stove he cleaned, ask for cheese he had just purchased, and carry 27 seconds of betrayal somewhere behind her eyes without a tremor. "Long line?" she asked, unpacking the groceries. Matthew watched her place the Parmesan beside the cutting board. "A little." She opened the sparkling water and slid the cans into the refrigerator. "I thought you forgot. You were gone longer than usual." He looked at her then. Really looked. 9 years had taught him the smallest details of her face. The tiny crease near her left eye when she was annoyed. The way her mouth softened when she wanted forgiveness before asking for it. The nervous tapping of her ring finger when she was hiding a purchase. Tonight, she was smooth. Too smooth. "Traffic in the parking lot," he said. She accepted that because she expected him to be easy. The word from the memo returned so sharply he had to turn toward the sink and rinse his hands just to keep from clenching them. Easy to fool. He dried his hands with the blue towel hanging from the oven handle, the one her mother had embroidered for their anniversary. And for a second, he remembered the early years before everything became polished and distant. Olivia crying in their first apartment because the heat went out and Matthew stayed awake with a space heater borrowed from a neighbor. Olivia holding his hand in the hospital waiting room after her father's surgery, whispering that she did not know what she would do without him. Olivia laughing barefoot in a rented cabin in Wisconsin when he burned pancakes and blamed the skillet. Those memories rose like witnesses for the defense, begging him to consider the woman she had been. But the voice memo was evidence from the woman she had become. Dinner was quiet, though not suspiciously quiet, because Matthew knew how to make silence look tired. Olivia talked about a client meeting, a delayed shipment at her office, a coworker who brought cupcakes for someone's birthday. She never said Derek's name. That absence sat at the table between them with a full plate. Matthew asked simple questions and gave simple answers. He ate the pasta. He complimented the sauce. He even poured her a glass of water when she coughed lightly, because cruelty would have been easier for her to understand than discipline. After dinner, Olivia leaned against the counter and scrolled through her phone, thumb moving quickly, face tilted away. Matthew loaded the dishwasher one plate at a time. Each click of ceramic into the rack helped him stay in his body. Plate, fork, glass, bowl. Marriage can end in dramatic ways, but sometimes it ends while one person rinses sauce from a dish and the other deletes messages 3 feet away. At 9:15, Olivia said she was going upstairs to shower. Matthew waited until he heard the bathroom fan turn on. Then he opened his laptop at the kitchen table and created a timeline. Thursday, 6:18 p.m. Voice memo received. Contents reference Derek, prior meeting, deception, planned late work excuse. Thursday, 6:24 p.m. Screenshot saved. Thursday, 6:31 p.m. Copy forwarded to private email. Thursday evening, Olivia behaves normally at dinner. He did not type the word affair. He did not type the word humiliation. He did not need to. The facts were heavy enough without decoration. Then he opened the joint credit card statement. One dinner downtown 2 weeks ago on a night Olivia had said she was stuck at work. A hotel lounge charge labeled as a client meeting. Rideshare receipts from neighborhoods nowhere near her office. Nothing wild. Nothing cinematic. Just small, quiet numbers standing in a row, waiting for him to stop being blind. Upstairs, the water shut off. Matthew saved the file, closed the laptop, and placed it on the chair beside him. When Olivia came back down in a robe and asked if everything was okay, he looked up with the calm face of a man who had finally learned that knowing too soon can ruin the truth. "Everything is normal," he said. She smiled, relieved by the very word that should have warned her. But Olivia did not know normal had changed. She did not know the husband she thought she could fool had already become the witness she would have to answer to. The next morning, Matthew woke before the alarm, not because he had slept well, but because his mind had spent the night replaying 27 seconds in Olivia's voice until every word had worn a groove through him. The bedroom was still dark, the curtains closed against the gray Illinois dawn, and Olivia slept beside him with one hand tucked beneath her cheek, peaceful in a way that felt almost offensive. He studied the outline of her face in the dim light and tried to match it with the woman from the memo. The same woman who once cried when he proposed beside Lake Michigan. The same woman who squeezed his hand during her father's surgery and called him her steady place. The same woman who now laughed to another man about how easy he was to fool. Matthew slid quietly out of bed and went downstairs, careful not to let the old fourth step creak. The house still carried the smell of last night's pasta, faint garlic and tomato clinging to the kitchen like a memory that refused to leave. He made coffee without turning on the overhead light, then sat at the table with his laptop open and the screen dimmed. At 5:42 a.m., he listened to the voice memo one more time. Not to torture himself, to remove the last excuse. Sometimes the heart tries to soften evidence into misunderstanding, and Matthew knew better than anyone that bad numbers do not become good numbers because you dislike the total. Her voice filled the kitchen again, low and careless. "Derek, last night was a mistake I would make again." Matthew is so easy to fool. He paused the file before the laugh, because the laugh was the part that made his hands cold. Not the secret, the contempt. He opened the timeline and added a new line. Friday, 5:42 a.m., voice memo reviewed and preserved. Then he began rebuilding the last 2 months from ordinary pieces. A dinner charge at a downtown Chicago steakhouse on a Wednesday. Olivia said she had a late inventory meeting. A rideshare from River North to a boutique hotel lounge. A parking receipt near Derek Hayes' office building. A calendar entry Olivia had labeled client follow-up, repeated every other Friday. It was not one dramatic discovery. It was worse. It was a pattern wearing normal clothes. At 6:30, Olivia came downstairs in leggings and one of Matthew's old Northwestern sweatshirts, rubbing her eyes and asking if he had made coffee. He looked at the sweatshirt for 1 second too long. She had always liked wearing his clothes on quiet mornings. It used to make him feel chosen. Now it felt like she had borrowed warmth from a man she was privately mocking. "Coffee is ready," he said. She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. "I sent you a voice memo yesterday. Did it go through?" Matthew kept his eyes on the laptop, though the document was minimized. There it was. The first crack in her calm. Small, careful, wrapped in casual tone. "I saw one," he said. Olivia froze for less than a second, then stirred creamer into her mug with too much focus. "That was meant for my sister. I was venting about work stuff. I think I deleted it right after." Matthew lifted his coffee and let the silence breathe. He wanted to ask whether her sister's name was Derek. He wanted to watch the room change. But truth is most useful when the person who fears it does not know how much of it has already been saved. "No problem," he said. Olivia looked at him quickly, trying to read beneath the words. Matthew gave her nothing. Not forgiveness. Not accusation. Just a flat surface where she expected a door. She laughed lightly, but it landed wrong. "You are quiet this morning." "Early meeting," he said. Another normal sentence. Another brick in the wall he was building between reaction and consequence. After she left for work, dressed carefully in a navy coat and gold earrings, Matthew stood by the front window and watched her car pull away. She did not know he had photographed the license plate of the car parked outside the house 2 Fridays earlier when she said a colleague had dropped off documents. At the time, he had felt silly for noticing. Now the plate sat in his folder beside Derek's name, and the shame of suspicion was beginning to transform into the relief of clarity. At 9, Matthew called Caleb Turner, his closest friend from college, a man who worked in corporate compliance and had once told him that the first rule of a crisis was not to make the second mistake while reacting to the first. Caleb answered on the second ring. "You sound like you have not slept," he said. Matthew looked at the folder on his screen. "I need you to tell me I am not overthinking something." He sent the voice memo, the screenshot, and the first page of the timeline. Caleb stayed silent while reading. Then he said, "You are not overthinking. You are underreacting, which is probably saving you." Matthew closed his eyes. That sentence did what sleep had not. It steadied him. Caleb gave him the name of an attorney, Jonathan Pierce, and told him to keep everything written, keep copies outside the house, and stop giving Olivia emotional previews of what he knew. By noon, Matthew had an appointment scheduled for Monday morning and a second backup of the file stored where Olivia would never look. When he returned to his desk, a text from Olivia waited on his phone. "Sorry if that memo sounded weird. Long day yesterday." He stared at it until the screen dimmed. Weird. That was what she called it. Not wrong. Not damaging. Weird. He added the text to the timeline and typed one final note beneath it. Olivia attempts to minimize memo. Then he closed the file. Outside, Naperville moved through its ordinary Friday: school buses, delivery vans, commuters, people living lives that still trusted the voices coming through their phones. Matthew sat in the quiet kitchen and understood something that hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. Olivia did not fear losing him yet. She feared being caught before she was ready to manage the story. Matthew spent the day organizing every detail of the voice memo and cross-referencing it with his calendar, receipts, and Olivia's vague excuses from the past weeks. Each note he took became a small anchor in a sea that had suddenly grown turbulent, giving him a way to chart the patterns of her duplicity. He set up a spreadsheet with columns for date, time, location, and correspondence, filling in the spots with precise details. How she had called to say she was at a client meeting when the rideshare receipt contradicted the story, and where her phone had pinged when she claimed to be working late at the office. By mid-afternoon, he had a visual map of her movements and a timeline that left very little room for doubt. Still, he resisted the urge to send her messages confronting her directly, recalling Caleb's advice that anticipation and overexposure could weaken his position. Instead, he focused on securing evidence, scanning documents, and making multiple backups, some stored on encrypted drives far from the house, some cloud-based but double-protected. He even took screenshots of calendar events and text exchanges that seemed harmless, but, when looked at in context, painted a very different picture. When the doorbell rang, he froze for a second, expecting Olivia, but it was the delivery man with a package he had ordered the week before, a new camera lens he planned to use for side projects, not to spy, but to document his surroundings more accurately for the timeline. After signing, he placed it on the counter and considered the ordinary life around him. The sound of distant traffic, the neighbor mowing the lawn, and the light shifting through the window blinds. It was almost surreal to think that this calm exterior hid so many hidden truths. In the evening, he called Caleb again, explaining in detail what he had found, including the precise timestamps of each event and how each small lie fit into a bigger pattern. Caleb was silent for a moment, then said, "You're doing this right. Keep documenting everything. And remember that consistency is your ally. If you stay meticulous, there will be no room for ambiguity." Matthew hung up and allowed himself a moment to breathe, then went to the kitchen to make a simple dinner, the familiar smells of grilled chicken and steamed vegetables grounding him in reality. Olivia returned home later than usual, chatting on her phone, seemingly unaware of the meticulous reconstruction of events taking place while she was away. Matthew listened quietly from the living room, letting the words flow past him without reaction, noting gestures, tone, and timing, all without interruption. He did not interrupt, did not ask questions, did not reveal his awareness. By the end of the night, he had a comprehensive file, with precise annotations, timestamps, and descriptions of behaviors that might otherwise seem trivial but, when combined, painted a picture of deliberate concealment. He set the laptop aside and looked at Olivia, who smiled at a joke she had just read on her phone. He did not respond, did not smile, and did not move. Instead, he made a note to himself that tomorrow would be another day to observe, record, and solidify the evidence before deciding on the next steps. The quiet of the house settled around him, but in his mind, the timeline continued to expand and connect each into a clear, undeniable map of what had really been happening. Saturday morning opened with the kind of quiet that made every small sound feel guilty. Matthew stood at the kitchen counter before sunrise, watching coffee drip into the pot, while Olivia slept upstairs, and the house around him seemed to hold its breath. The voice memo was no longer just a file. It had become the first loose thread in a sweater that was coming apart faster than he could pull. By 7, he had opened the joint account statement again, not searching for drama, only confirming patterns. A florist charge on a day Olivia said she had worked through lunch. 2 parking payments near River North. A hotel lounge receipt marked as a client follow-up. Small numbers, ordinary numbers, the kind that would have disappeared into monthly spending if her own voice had not taught him where to look. He saved each one, labeled each one, and backed them up with the patience of a man building a bridge out of facts because feelings were too unstable to stand on. At 8:30, Olivia came downstairs in running clothes, hair tied back, phone already in her hand. "I am meeting Jenna for yoga," she said, reaching for a banana without looking at him. Jenna was her sister. Jenna lived 40 minutes away and hated morning classes. Matthew looked at his coffee, then at the phone in her hand. "Have fun," he said. Olivia paused, not because the words were strange, but because the tone was too clean. No question, no request, no soft husbandly concern she could bend into evidence of control. She smiled carefully. "You seem distant." Matthew lifted his mug. "Just tired." She watched him for another second, then left through the garage. The door closed. A minute later, his phone buzzed with a notification from the shared calendar. Olivia had removed a work dinner from next Thursday. No explanation. Just gone. Matthew took a screenshot. At 9:15, Caleb Turner called. "Do not spend the whole day staring at the file," Caleb said. "You need air." Matthew almost told him air would not change anything, but he knew his friend was right. So he drove to the DuPage Riverwalk, parked near the footbridge, and walked without headphones. The November air was cold enough to make his eyes water, and fallen leaves moved along the path in little dry waves. Couples passed with coffee cups. A father lifted a toddler onto his shoulders. 2 older women argued gently about which bakery had better cinnamon rolls. Normal life everywhere, moving forward without permission. Matthew stopped by the water and leaned both hands on the railing. For 9 years, he had believed trust meant not looking too closely. He had confused loyalty with giving Olivia the benefit of every doubt, even when doubt had earned the right to sit at the table. But trust without accountability was not love. It was a blindfold someone else tied for you. When he returned home near noon, Olivia was not back. At 12:20, she texted, "Yoga ran long, grabbing lunch with Jenna." Matthew replied, "Okay." Then he opened his laptop and checked something he had avoided all morning. Olivia's sister's public social media page showed Jenna at her son's soccer tournament in Aurora, wrapped in a blanket, holding a thermos, posted 20 minutes earlier. Matthew stared at the photo, not because he needed more proof, but because each unnecessary lie cut differently. The voice memo had revealed betrayal. The yoga lie revealed habit. At 2, Olivia finally returned, smelling like expensive perfume instead of a gym, carrying a paper shopping bag from a boutique downtown. "Jenna says hi," she said, setting the bag on the counter. Matthew looked at her, and for one dangerous second the sentence almost escaped him. "No, she does not." Instead, he nodded. That was nice of her. Olivia went upstairs, humming softly. That hum told him she still thought the performance was working. By late afternoon, Matthew emailed Jonathan Pierce's office to confirm Monday's consultation and attach the voice memo, the timeline, and the most relevant financial records. He hesitated before pressing send, not because he doubted the facts, but because the moment felt like crossing a bridge that would not exist behind him after he stepped off. Then he remembered Olivia's laugh in the memo. Easy to fool. He pressed send. That evening, Olivia cooked salmon and asked whether he wanted to watch a movie. The domestic sweetness of it felt almost cruel. She curled onto one end of the couch under the gray blanket they bought on their first anniversary, while Matthew sat in the chair across from her, with his phone face down on his knee. Halfway through the movie, her phone lit up. She turned it over too quickly. Matthew saw only the first name before the screen went dark. Derek. He did not react. He did not need to. The room already knew. Olivia looked toward him, searching for suspicion, and found none. That seemed to calm her. It should not have. At 10, she went upstairs. Matthew stayed in the living room, the paused movie casting blue light across the walls. He opened the timeline and added the day's entries. False yoga plan, sister verified elsewhere, lunch claim unsupported, Derek message observed. Then he wrote one sentence at the bottom, not for the lawyer, but for himself. She is not afraid of hurting me. She is afraid of losing control of the story. He saved the file and closed the laptop. Outside, the neighborhood settled into darkness. Inside, Matthew sat alone in the glow of a screen that had finally gone black, understanding that Olivia did not know silence could record more than sound. Sunday morning began with Olivia trying to repair the wrong problem. She made pancakes, the kind she used to make during the first year of marriage when the house was still full of cheap furniture and expensive hope, and she hummed near the stove as if sweetness could cover the sound of the voice memo still living in Matthew's files. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching sunlight move across the tile while she flipped batter in the pan and glanced at him too often. Guilt changes a person's timing. It makes every smile arrive half a second late. I thought we could have a quiet morning, she said, placing a plate in front of him. Syrup, butter, sliced strawberries. All the small details she remembered when she wanted the room to feel safe. Matthew looked at the plate and thought of Saturday's lie, Jenna at a soccer tournament while Olivia came home smelling like perfume and carrying a boutique bag from downtown Chicago. That sounds nice, he said. Olivia relaxed because she mistook calm for ignorance. After breakfast, she sat across from him and reached for his hand. He let her touch his fingers, not because he believed her, but because the gesture told him what she was trying to protect. Not love. Normal. You have been strange all weekend, she said softly. Did I do something? The question was almost impressive. Matthew looked at her wedding ring, then at the small scratch on the table where he had once dropped a screwdriver while fixing a loose drawer slide. He had repaired so many things in that house that he sometimes forgot repairs only matter when both people want the thing to hold. You tell me, he said. Olivia's hand withdrew slowly. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the amount of truth he had. I just feel like you are upset about that voice memo, she said. I told you it was nothing. Nothing. The word landed between them like a cloth thrown over broken glass. Matthew nodded once. I heard you. She smiled too quickly. Good. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. She turned it face down before the second vibration. Matthew did not look at it. He did not need to. The house had begun answering for her. At noon, Olivia said she needed to run errands. Matthew watched from the front window as she sat in her car for almost 3 minutes before pulling away. The moment her taillights disappeared, he opened his laptop and checked the email from Jonathan Pierce's assistant confirming the Monday meeting. Then he attached one additional note. Olivia appears aware the voice memo may be an issue, but continues to minimize it. He pressed send, then sat in silence for a while, letting the weight of the next day settle on him. Around 2, Caleb Turner called. Tomorrow is not about winning, Caleb said. It is about getting instructions before you make a mistake. Matthew looked around the living room, at the framed photos along the wall. Their trip to Door County. Their first Christmas in the house. Olivia smiling beside him at a charity dinner where she had squeezed his arm and called him her anchor. What if part of me still wants her to explain it in a way that makes it hurt less? He asked. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then that part of you is human. Just do not let it drive. After the call, Matthew walked through the house with a legal pad and wrote down what mattered. Mortgage, joint accounts, retirement contributions, insurance, vehicles, communication in writing, temporary housing if needed. He did not want to move out blindly. He did not want to punish Olivia recklessly. He wanted clean steps, practical steps, the kind of steps a man takes when his heart is injured, but his mind refuses to abandon him too. Olivia came home just before 5, carrying groceries they did not need. She set them on the counter and said Derek's name without meaning to. The deli was crowded. The correction was small, but the room heard it. Matthew looked up from the sink. Olivia froze. Her face lost color so quickly, he almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Long line, he asked. She nodded, eyes fixed on the cabinet behind him. Yes, long line. That was when Matthew understood the final piece. Olivia was no longer managing him. She was managing panic. The memo had not just exposed her. It had trapped her inside every normal sentence, where one wrong syllable could open the floor. Dinner that night was quiet. Olivia tried 3 times to start a conversation about television, the neighbor's new fence, and whether they should repaint the guest room. Matthew answered politely, then returned to silence. At 9, he went to the small home office, closed the door, and printed the full timeline. The printer hummed and clicked, page after page sliding into the tray. The voice memo transcript, screenshots, financial records, calendar notes, Saturday's false yoga claim, Sunday's slip of Derek's name. He placed everything into a plain folder and wrote Jonathan Pierce on the tab. Then he made a second folder for himself and wrote Olivia on that one. Not wife. Not love. Olivia. When he came back to the bedroom, she was already under the covers, pretending to sleep. Matthew stood beside the bed for a moment, listening to her breathing, knowing she was awake from the uneven rhythm. He wanted to say her name. He wanted to ask why. He wanted to ask whether 9 years had meant anything before they became material for a secret laugh. Instead, he turned off the lamp and lay down on his side, facing the window. Tomorrow, he would meet the attorney. Tomorrow, the truth would leave the kitchen and enter a room where it could not be softened by pancakes, perfume, or nervous smiles. And this time, Matthew did not need to raise his voice. Hers had already done enough. Matthew woke early on Monday, the sky barely lightening outside his window, the silence of the apartment amplifying each thought like footsteps in an empty hall. He dressed carefully, selecting a navy shirt and khaki pants, items that would let him appear neutral, composed, unshaken. Breakfast was simple, oatmeal and coffee, a contrast to the elaborate spreads Olivia had once prepared. He moved through the apartment methodically, collecting the documents he had printed, bank statements, emails, voice memo transcripts, and notes. Each page was a reminder, a small brick in the foundation of a plan to regain clarity and control. By 7:45 a.m., he was ready to leave. The hallway smelled faintly of mildew and old carpet, a stark reminder of how far he had come from the mansion they had shared. As he locked the door, he felt a mixture of determination and apprehension. Driving to the attorney's office, he rehearsed what he would say, how he would present the evidence calmly, logically, without letting emotions dominate. The city was waking up, cars honking, people hurrying past coffee shops and bus stops, unaware of the personal storm Matthew carried. At the office, the receptionist greeted him with a polite smile, which he returned with a nod. In the waiting area, he reviewed the folders once more, noting inconsistencies and key points, preparing for questions. Olivia's face flickered in his mind, her smile in the photos, her gestures, and the careless laughter captured in the voice memo. He allowed himself a deep breath, remembering that the past could not control the present, that this day was about truth and practical resolution. When called into the meeting room, he placed the folders on the table, sitting upright, hands resting calmly. The attorney, Jonathan Pierce, acknowledged him and began reviewing the materials, asking clarifying questions about timelines, communications, and financial transactions. Matthew answered precisely, calmly, without hesitation, noting every detail he had observed over the weekend and from prior interactions. He felt a sense of relief begin to seep in as the discussion progressed, realizing that clarity and preparation were forms of empowerment he had underestimated. Hours passed as they outlined steps for negotiations, temporary arrangements, and potential settlements, all with an emphasis on fairness and transparency. Matthew absorbed every instruction, committed to moving forward methodically, not allowing impulse or anger to dictate decisions. After the meeting, he returned to the apartment, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor. He paused by the window, looking out at the street below, imagining the routine of ordinary life continuing while his own life had shifted dramatically. He felt a small measure of strength and control, knowing that he had taken the first step toward regaining autonomy. When Olivia returned that evening, she found him reviewing notes at the kitchen table, his posture calm but deliberate. They exchanged a brief greeting, the air between them neutral, measured. Dinner was uneventful, but it was the first time in weeks that Matthew felt the weight of uncertainty lighten slightly. As he prepared for bed, he reflected on the day, the steps he had taken, the documentation he had compiled, the preparation that had replaced panic with confidence. He lay down, facing the window, listening to the hum of the city and feeling a sense of resolve. Tomorrow would bring more steps, more conversations, and perhaps the beginning of a future that was guided by clarity and control rather than confusion and betrayal. The next morning, Matthew awoke to a soft light filtering through the blinds, the apartment quiet except for the distant hum of city traffic. He moved deliberately, making coffee and arranging the documents from yesterday in a neat stack on the table, each paper a small triumph over confusion and anxiety. The previous days had been a whirlwind of emotional turmoil and methodical preparation, and today he felt a cautious optimism that clarity was gaining ground. While sipping his coffee, he reviewed the voice memo again, listening for details he might have missed, confirming timestamps and phrasing to ensure he had an accurate understanding of the situation. The plan for today involved reaching out to financial advisors and securing documentation to support his case in ongoing discussions, all while maintaining composure and a measured approach. When the phone rang, it was the advisor, and Matthew explained the situation succinctly, noting all relevant details, and they discussed possible steps to safeguard his finances and future living arrangements. The conversation was professional, calm, and focused on practical outcomes, which gave Matthew a sense of empowerment and control he had not felt in weeks. After the call, he stepped to the window and observed the neighborhood below, noticing people rushing to work, kids walking to school, and cars streaming along the street, all oblivious to the personal storm he had navigated and the decisions that now lay ahead. By mid-morning, he was prepared to visit the bank, taking the voice memo transcript and supporting documents, ready to consult with the manager about secure transfers and temporary arrangements. At the bank, the discussion was efficient, professional, and devoid of unnecessary emotion. The staff listened, verified documents, and provided guidance for the safest, most effective way to manage his accounts and access necessary funds. Matthew left feeling a sense of accomplishment, realizing that proactive steps, careful planning, and maintaining a calm demeanor were turning what initially seemed insurmountable into manageable challenges. On his way back, he paused at a small park, breathing in fresh air and letting the sun warm his face, reflecting on the changes he had implemented and the boundaries he had established. That evening, he returned home and organized his schedule, noting appointments, follow-ups, and personal reflections, ensuring that every action had a purpose and every decision reinforced control and stability. Olivia returned late, unaware of the structured and deliberate progress he had made, and their brief interaction was neutral, professional, a reminder that the dynamics had shifted but clarity and reason now guided his responses. Matthew prepared a simple dinner, took time to enjoy it, and then reviewed the plan for the next day, reflecting on how much progress had been made through methodical steps, careful observation, and measured action. As he settled in for the night, he felt a cautious satisfaction, recognizing that clarity, preparation, and deliberate choices were reclaiming his life, and that each step, no matter how small, was building a foundation for a future defined by his own decisions and careful strategy. By Wednesday evening, Matthew no longer needed the voice memo to remind him what had changed. It was still saved in 3 places, still backed up, still attached to the file Jonathan Pierce had reviewed, but the sound of Olivia's voice had stopped being the center of the room. The center had become the quiet decision sitting underneath everything he did. He would not argue with a lie that had already exposed itself. He would not chase an explanation from someone who had only started searching for one after she realized he might know the truth. He would not let 9 years of responsibility become a reason to keep swallowing disrespect. Olivia sensed the shift before he ever said it. That night, she stood in the kitchen doorway while Matthew placed a plain folder on the table beside his phone. She looked at the folder, then at his face, and for the first time all week, the polished calm she had been wearing cracked in a way she could not quickly repair. "Matthew," she said softly, "can we please stop acting like something is wrong?" He looked at her for a long moment. The kitchen was the same kitchen where she had asked for Parmesan, the same kitchen where she had smiled with a secret behind her eyes, the same kitchen where he had washed dishes while her messages disappeared into silence. "No," he said, "we can stop acting." Olivia's fingers tightened around the edge of the doorway. "What does that mean?" Matthew picked up his phone, placed it on the table, and pressed play. Her voice filled the room, gentle and careless, speaking to Derek as if Matthew existed only as a problem to manage. Last night was a mistake I would make again. Matthew is so easy to fool. He watched Olivia hear herself become evidence. She reached toward the phone, then stopped, as if touching it might make the words disappear. I can explain, she whispered. Matthew nodded once. I know you can. That is why I spoke to a lawyer before giving you the chance. Her face changed completely then. Not because she was sorry, not yet. Because the story had moved beyond her control. He opened the folder and turned the pages toward her. The timeline, the screenshots, the financial records, the false yoga claim, the attorney's instructions, a preliminary separation notice. Every page was clean, calm, and impossible to laugh away. Olivia sat down slowly, her eyes moving from one document to the next. You were collecting all of this? She asked. No, Matthew said. You were creating it. I was preserving it. That sentence landed harder than anger would have. She looked toward the stairs, then back at him, searching for the husband who used to soften whenever her voice trembled. He still cared. That was the painful truth. But caring was no longer the same as staying. Derek said it was nothing, she said suddenly, like a person reaching for a branch already breaking. Matthew almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then call him. Olivia stared at him. What? Call him, Matthew said. Tell him I know. Tell him the marriage is no longer protected by my ignorance. See what he says. She did not want to. That told him enough. Still, with shaking hands, she picked up her phone and called. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. A text arrived 2 minutes later. I cannot be involved in this. Olivia read it, and the last illusion left her face. Derek had enjoyed being chosen in secret, but he had no interest in standing beside her in daylight. Matthew picked up the folder and placed it back in front of himself. Future communication will be in writing or through Jonathan, he said. I am going to stay near the office for now. Olivia's eyes filled. You are leaving? He looked around the kitchen he had helped build into a life, the cabinets he had repaired, the calendar he kept updated, the grocery list still pinned to the refrigerator. No, he said quietly. I am finally responding to what I heard. He left with one overnight bag and the phone that had carried the truth to him by accident. Months later, Matthew lived in a smaller apartment closer to Chicago, where the mornings were quieter and no one asked him to confuse stability with blindness. The divorce moved forward without spectacle. Olivia sent one long email apologizing for the affair, for the lies, and for laughing at the trust he had given her. Matthew read it twice, then replied with one sentence. I hope you learn to respect honesty before you need it from someone else. He did not send the voice memo to friends. He did not embarrass her online. He did not need applause from strangers to prove the wound had been real. The truth had already spoken in her own voice. And sometimes that is enough. So what do you think? Was Matthew right to stay silent until he had the full truth? Or should he have confronted Olivia the moment he heard the message? Have you ever seen someone mistake trust for weakness, only to realize too late that quiet people remember everything? If stories like this make you think about loyalty, boundaries, and the power of calm decisions, stay with this channel, because some lessons are easier to hear in a story than to learn after the wrong voice memo reaches the right person.